Okay, folks, we are live for another live Q&A, and this time we have the legend that is Smokin, who is a former F-14 Tomcat RIO. But it's been, I think, it was it June last year we last spoke. So if so, like, what have you been up to?
Well, Mike, I think it was June of last year. What have I been up to? Gosh, it's been a fast year. Unfortunately, I just had knee surgery, so I haven't been able to get up and walk around a whole lot. But have been working on the Instagram account for quite a while. We've kind of gone up to about 35, 40,000 viewers, so that's pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah. While you're on that, like, tell us how that started. Was it your idea or was it someone else's? And because it has gone crazy.
Well, you got a bunch of folks in the community that do a great job of talking about the Tomcat, but the one guy who talked me into doing it is my flight school roommate, a guy named Keith Virus Shomig. His Instagram account is at Tomcat Cockpit POV, and he was like, "Hey, you got to do this." And so that was probably about 2 years ago, and we just started off kind of talking, and then he's like, "Why don't you just open up an account?" And so I did, and it's taken off from there.
Awesome stuff. But we're gonna have a bit of a chit chat here. But folks, get your questions coming in for Smoking. But yeah, if folks haven't saw your interview and or know who you are, can you just give us a bit of a background of your career in the Navy?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Graduated from the Naval Academy in '96 and then selected F-14s in '98. My first operational tour was in VF-154. At that time, VF-154 was F-14As, and they were deployed to Japan and AF Atsugi at that time on board the USS Kitty Hawk. Rotated back from there to be an instructor at VF-101. That's where I was on the demo team, and we did a full demo season there. And then, kind of fast forward to 2005, that was the last demo we did at Oceana for the Tomcat. Went on to do a few other tours. In fact, spent time on Capitol Hill as Senator John McCain's legislative fellow. So, if folks know politics, he's one of our guys that was a naval aviator in the Senate, and then retired in 2016. So kind of a 20-year career and a lot of fun, but probably about 2,000 hours total time in fighter jets, and most of that is going to be Tomcat.
That's amazing. So guys, get your questions coming in. But if you can scroll up, I think the questions are coming in. Yeah, for your Smoking. And guys, enjoy this one.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, everybody. So just real quick start off, I'll go through the questions, but folks may have a question about my background. That is actually a painting by Rick Herter, Herter, who's a fantastic gentleman, and I commissioned that for him. This is the last Tomcat demo flight. That's Oceana in the background, of course, an F-14D that we flew back on 2005, September 2005, and it's entitled Last Demo Baby. So that was Rocco and myself, which happened to be my last Tomcat flight. So let's start with the questions. Looks like Max Power is the first one up in the queue, and they say, "What was the APG-71 able to launch the AIM-120?" Good question. So for those that don't know, APG-71 was the radar in the F-14D. It's an upgrade from the AUG-9, which was what you found in the F-14A and B. And the question is, could you launch the AIM-120, which is the Amram, Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile? So the answer is yes. I would think that we could. In fact, I think we tested it. There's a great snapshot. My friend Virus Shomig talks about it in one of his posts on Instagram. But the funding just wasn't there to match up all of the software upgrades that you'd have to do to put the AMRAM onto the Tomcat. And then I think one of Virus's greatest lines in there, he says, we already had the Phoenix, which was our missile. And so why would we want a Diet Phoenix, which I think is fantastic. Nobody wants a Diet Phoenix. So the answer is we never really carried the AIM-120. It was only Phoenix for both the AUG-9 and APG-71. Next question is from Prasoon Shristha. I think I've got that right. 38338. What was the performance compared to the F-14B or Bravo? Great question. So you got to remember the B and the D were very similar in terms of size, and both had the GE 110 engine. So they had the big motors versus the F-14A, which had the Pratt & Whitney TF30 engines. F-14B and the F-14 were very, very comparable, I would say, in terms of how you flew them and fought them. I would say probably the biggest differences really between the B and the D would be internal to the cockpit, not really external in terms of like motors and maneuverability. F-14B still had AUG-9, and it still had a few of the older legacy items in it. The F-14D was, brand spanking new in terms of technology for when it was built. And so you had a few other things in there besides the APG-71 that made it really nice. One of them, big one, was probably a data link and the ability to link up with other jets. That was nice. And also GPS. So later on in the F-14B's life, very late, it got GPS capability, which allowed it to drop joint direct attack munitions. But F-14D was probably a little bit better internally from a performance standpoint. But both of them very similar in terms of, how much gas they could carry, what their combat radius range was, all of those things. Question here from Golf 7275. Did you prefer flying the A or the D? So I'm kind of unique in that the majority of my time, probably got about 1,200 hours in the F-14, but the majority of my time would be in the A. So you kind of love what you're most familiar with. And so the F-14A, while a lot of people denigrate it, I would say it was still a very capable platform. The F-14A had certainly the small motors, but those are still pretty good. And when they're tuned correctly, they really didn't have any problems. You also had a lantern pod, which is obviously the B and the D had it, but you had a nice flat screen, a PTID is what it was called, to view that. And your familiarity with, the platform probably made it a lot more of my favorite. When you get into an F-14D, and I remember one RIO describing this, is like if you just sit in the cockpit and you look around for a second, he goes, there's probably going to be a button that you're going to want to hit to get done what you want to get done. You just got to find that button. And so the F-14A was a lot more manual things that you had to do. And so, a famous line from Chaser Keithley was, an F-14D will make a good RIO look bad and a bad RIO look good. And I get what he's saying. So F-14A would be mine. All right. Next question is F-14 NRD-214. Did you have any control of the wing sweep? So I think the question really is, did the computer do the wing sweep mostly, or did the pilot or did the RIO have any control of the wing sweep? Well, the RIO didn't have any control of the wing sweep at all. The pilot could move the wing sweep handle into a manual mode and override the computer, but for the most part, the wing sweep was controlled by a central air data computer that really programmed the wings. So, if you think about it, the wings are out when you want to be maneuverable, certainly during takeoff, and then in maybe a dogfighting mode, and then the wings are swept back when you want to go fast. Now, I do have one C story on this, which I think is kind of relevant to the question. Rocco and I, we were both senior JOs in Japan, and this was a kind of late in our tour. We were taking up a jet to do carrier qualifications, and so we're working about 120 miles off the coast of Japan. It was night. We had just gotten to the Marshall stack, and Rocco's like, hey, man, I'm trying to move the wings, and I can't get the handle back into the detent, and I can't get the wings to move out back forward. And I get my flashlight out, and I looked, and the wings they were programmed, normally it's 20 degrees out, and they were probably programmed about 30 or 35 degrees back. I could tell that. And he's like, hey, I'm going to jiggle the handle and see if I can get the wings to move forward. Obviously, because you can't land the jet with the wings in some manner of swept mode. And so he moves the handle, and it doesn't go forward. It goes further back. And I'm like, stop that. Quit moving that. And what had happened was the motor, I believe there's kind of two channels in the motor. The motor had failed to move the wings forward, and you can only move the wings back. So now we've got the wings back at about 50 or 55 degrees. Well, at that point, you can't land aboard the ship anymore. And so what we did was we called a rep, who actually happened to be the commanding officer in the ship at that time. We went through the book procedures. There really wasn't a lot you could do other than, hey, we're going to have to go back to land at Sugi. And so we burned down all of our weight that we could. And of course, you remember when the wings are back, you're very fast. So we came down, and this is probably the first time the only time I guess I've ever briefed what I was going to do in case we had an ejection. Most of the time, you don't have time to think about that. And so we briefed what we were going to do if we missed the short field gear to arrest, and kind of what our criteria was. We came in, we burned down, we probably circled for 20 minutes, got the gas almost to zero, came down, landed, took a trap, and thankfully that was all that happened. But when we touched down, we were about 185, 190 knots, which for those that don't know, that's really fast. And I think the tire speed is probably about 185. You don't want to go too fast or you'll smoke them. So did we have any control of the wing sweep at that time? Hell no. All right, John Bayless. Hi, Joe. Was VF-154 a desirable assignment, and was it part of a West Coast assignment board? Lastly, do you think the D model could still be flying today considering the Chinese threat? Okay, so 154, yeah, I would say it might not have been quite the most desirable assignment just because it was in Japan and you were away from everybody else. However, when you got to Japan and you saw how things worked from a standpoint of basically getting parts and resources, it was phenomenal. Now, we had full up access to all the parts and maintenance and everything that we needed because we were forward deployed, certainly forward deployed for both the Chinese threat and, of course, North Korea. And so that was really fantastic. The other thing about being in Japan is it's a very unique country, and there's a whole lot of things that you can do in Japan that you'll never get a chance to do living in the States. And so from that perspective, I think a lot of people maybe, and me personally, may have dreaded it. But after 3 years over there, I was very pleased and glad that I was in 154. Great group of guys, great squadron, and you get Westpacks. So you get to stop in fantastic places like Australia, Hong Kong at that time, and other locations. So it turned out to be a very desirable assignment. Do I think the D model Tomcat could still be flying today considering the Chinese threat? Could it still be flying today? Absolutely. Would you want to put that much effort and money into maintenance? Fairly, I think if you had what I would call a detachment level of squadrons, maybe not a full complement, but maybe you had 6 or 8 or 20 even, where you've got a manageable size of maintenance and parts and all of those things. Absolutely, I think you could do it. And what I would say where it would really be a great asset would be in the forward air control airborne role, where you got 2 guys in the cockpit and they're able to direct, other fighters airborne. And so that's where I think it would be really a great asset. But frankly, obviously F-35, F-18 Super Hornet, those are certainly Gen 4 plus and Gen 5 aircraft. Those guys are frankly very, very good. But still love my Tomcat. All right, RTD89. Hi, Joe. I was there for the last tech demo. Thanks. Cool. I'll never forget how awesome it was. Did you fly the B demo on Saturday as well as the Sunday demo in the D? Okay, so RTD, you're making my brain hurt. I know we had 2 or 3 jets for that last tech demo. What I think happened is you're accurate. I think we did jump into a B for the Saturday show, and someone will probably, who was there will probably remember better than me. And then we flew the final demo in the D on Sunday. It was certainly interchangeable from a perspective of what, the demo would be. You could fly either one of those, and the same maneuvers, the same setup, everything was the same. But from a B and a D perspective, really, there's not a lot of difference other than, one has a GPS and the other one you had to kind of do an alignment for the aircraft. So I believe you're right. So probably the B on Saturday and the D on Sunday. Somebody will tell me that. So let's see. Freckle Puny says hiya, and I say anytime, baby. Back to you, Freckle Puny. Good to see you. Hey, looks like we have Lorenzo on from F-14 Calverton ATG. Smokin baby Tomcats. He's a legend. Hey, follow his page. Just go to the Instagram. Find probably the guy that's got the most F-14 followers and the most knowledge on F-14s of anybody that I know. Good to see you. John Minter, how do you think the Super Hornet compares to the D model Tomcat in the air-to-air role? Ooh, great question. Okay, so I think the Super Hornet is very, very capable. I mean, we wouldn't have bought the darn thing if we didn't think it was capable. And it's got a lot of great toys in it. Certainly an upgraded radar, which is really nice. It's got certainly mids and all the link stuff that you want. And you've got the newer models obviously have, and guys are going to, I'm dating myself, but guys are going to have the ability to look both air to air and air to ground at the same time. So from that standpoint, it's phenomenal. I think maybe the limitations with the Hornet might be a little bit in terms of on station time and gas. It's still not perfect in that area. And certainly we're using those things pretty quickly. So the burn rate that we're going through, I think, is a lot. So there's going to be some what I call recurring themes come up for the Super Hornet later on in its life, similar to the way the Tomcat basically had recurring problems later on in its life. When you slam things down onto an aircraft carrier, you also use them as a 5-wet tanker, things are going to get bent. And so when things get bent, it gets harder to replace and get them back up and running. And so, I think we'll have to be very judicious with the way that we operated the Super Hornet. But it's a fantastic model. D model in the Tomcat was still a great air-to-air threat. A longer stick with the Phoenix, and certainly probably a little bit more on-station time, and could go into, burner, I guess, would be the best thing, and say you get away from people. But both of those are fantastic jets, and I like both of them. Let's see, Diego Giambarini. Good afternoon, Smokin. Diego from Miami. Awesome, Miami Vice. What was the best part of being a Tomcat guy, apart from what happened at the O Club and generally how cool it was? So I guess the question is, what's the best part about being a Tomcat guy other than the O Club and generally how cool it was? Well, I want to tell you right now, the Tomcat community, I don't think there's any other community that's ever been like the Tomcat community. And I'm talking from the youngest maintainer to the oldest guys flying. Everybody was involved and loved it. And I mean, they loved that jet. I'm talking guys that would be so excited to see that they worked their tail off, maintainers, to get that thing up and running and then watch it take off. You talk about the pride that you see from that. I don't think folks in the Hornet community or other communities, frankly, in the Air Force, have that kind of pride and passion for the jet. And, when I talk about the Tomcat, everybody gets a little bit of a chill about it. I think it was a unique aircraft, a wing sweep, very fast, certainly was a part of a movie, now 2 movies. You just get a really unique perspective working and living and breathing that thing, and everybody loved it. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing about being in the Tomcat community and being a Tomcat guy. And guys still talk about being a Tomcat guy. They may fly other aircraft, but man, they identify with it being a Tomcat. All right, let's see here. Hi Joe, this is from Steve74. Hi Joe, what was your favorite demo move and what was your max G during the min radius turn? Oh, great question, Steve. Okay, so the favorite demo move I think that everybody likes is obviously the high-speed pass. I don't know if anybody has seen the video of kind of our last high-speed pass, but we hit, I think, 0.98 with Rocco. And I'm kind of screaming at Rocco, hey, dude, just be careful. Realize that is where you're at a point where you could go transonic, certainly fast with the speed of sound in certain parts of the aircraft, canopy and some other things like that. The high-speed pass is probably the crowd favorite. from my perspective, probably one of the coolest ones, though, is the dirty double Immelman. And obviously, that's where you got the landing gear down. You do a dirty Immelman and then do it again. Really, the ability to do that is pretty darn impressive when you talk about big motors and a big heavy jet, and being able to show that off for folks that are in the know. I think really makes it probably the coolest maneuver. Max G during the min radius turn. So max G on the jet was like 6.5. Excuse me, 6.5. Didn't want to overstress the jet. Min radius turn, I can't remember. We're probably pulling 4 or 5 Gs. It's not a ton. One of the cool things about the min radius turn, though, that folks may not know is, remember, you're sitting at ground level when you're watching us. So when we do the min radius turn, on the backside, we kind of elevate a little bit. So it makes it look like it's a flat turn. But if you think about it, you're actually canted in the turn. But that backside's a little bit elevated. And that's where we say cans on, baby. So those that don't know about cans. Dulio Pentaglo, are you playing DCS F-14 in your free time? If so, what do you think about it? I don't play DCS, but I will tell you from what I see on the internet and Instagram and some of the guys that post things on DCS, looks like it's a phenomenal game. And I've heard that really replicates what you're doing in the jet. So that's good and kind of scary. Let's see. RTD89 says again, do you know of any time an F-14D beat a Super Hornet in BFM? I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure there's been chances where that's happened. I do know that Slammer Richardson, who was my CO at the F-14 RAG, would always take an F-14A out and try and fight guys and beat them regularly in an F-14D. So even though you have big motors, doesn't mean you're always going to win. And Slammer's a phenomenal pilot and fantastic CO. I think one of the cool things to note is really it's a lot about who is sitting in the cockpit and how good they are from a BFM perspective. And you hope to never get to that point, right? You want to shoot guys down BVR. Did you ever, Steve74 says, did you ever spin a Tomcat or lose an engine? Yes. I did not spin a Tomcat, thank God. We always practice that in the simulator. Did lose an engine several times. In fact, had a stall. I'm with, let's see, Casper Brazelton. There's a name out of the hat. And we are doing a bug out for getting away, essentially, from enemy. And the compressor stall on the left engine. Just big sound, pop kind of thing. And all of a sudden, all the electronic goes, and they come back on. Casper recycles engines and starts it back up. That's a quick example of a compressor stall we had in the A. And so that was one example of where I lost an engine. Also lost an engine several times, coming in just for whatever reason you had to shut it down. So we practice single engine approaches all the time with the ship and certainly on land. Let's see. Freckle Puny says, how superior was the F-14 to the F-111B? I've read articles from some suggesting the latter was not as bad as painted. Yeah, I think F-14 Tomcat and the F-111B are very similar in terms of, they both got swing wings, but the missions were completely different. F-14 started off as an air superiority fighter and then added certainly air-to-ground capability after that. F-111 is pretty much, just strike aircraft. Originally, I think those guys were having a lot of trouble, particularly when they got over to Vietnam and some of the rad out stuff was not working. The radar altimeter stuff was not working. They lost several. They fixed it. But I think, once you get through that initial scope of fixing things that, certainly are wrong and need to be fixed, the F-111 actually became a pretty good aircraft. Let's see. It looks like we have a Japanese friend, and this person says, what does the RIO do during a normal cruise? So I think maybe I'll just talk a little bit about what does the RIO do on a normal flight. A cruise would obviously be when you're deployed. A normal flight is really a couple of things. Remember, the Tomcat was old enough that it was set up in the way that the pilot did all the basically flying of the aircraft, and the RIO did everything else. And that's communication, so all the radios, handling into the electronic control measures, handling into the air-to-ground items like the lantern pod, and then certainly the AUG-9, which is the radar. The two, though, worked in tandem with each other. And you had a lot of what we call crew resource management. So as an example, if you were going to shoot a missile, the RIO would lock up the target, verify that that was the target, and then pass the shot off to the pilot. That way the pilot verified that that was actually the target and then pulled the trigger. So a lot of, I guess, checks and balances between the two. All right, Freckle Puny says again, why is the max G rating in naval fighters rated lower than their Air Force counterparts? Ooh, I don't know the answer to that question. I would say that maybe the max Gs obviously are all about putting stress on the jet. My guess would be that it has to be with how it was engineered. F-16, looks like a little dart, and you can certainly turn that sucker probably at 9 Gs. F-14 is much more, large, lumbering aircraft. And while you could pull 9 Gs, it would certainly overstress the aircraft too much to make it, usable and bend things. So the engineering would be one. My guess, my second guess would be that when you slam things down on an aircraft carrier, you're going to bend them anyway. So let's try and minimize the bending we do up in the air. John Minter says, is that the final flight demo? Was it with VF-101? Yes. So John, the final flight was with VF-101. That was the fleet replacement squadron at the time for the Tomcat, and they also handled the F-14 demo. We had 4 guys on the demo team for the year prior, and then 2 of those guys left to become Blue Angels, Opie Wally and Linus Schwartz. And so we had one replacement fill in, a guy named John Roll Kaiser, who was a former demo guy. And then Rocco and I were really the last guys standing. And so that's why we got picked to do the final demo flight in 2005, a year later. And John also asked, being a Tomcat guy, what's your favorite CAG Tomcat paint scheme? Okay, so I'll just talk about kind of squadron paint schemes. I think all of them are really cool. The Jolly Rogers get a lot of, I guess, fans out there for the skull and crossbones, and they should. They're really cool. I think the Checkmate's tail looks pretty cool. Black Knight's tail looked pretty good with the knight on there. So those were all really cool paint schemes. But when I was a kid, there was a cartoon called Felix the Cat, and so VF-31 always had a small soft spot because they had Felix the Cat carrying a little bomb, and I thought that was probably the best one. Another question here from Freckle Puny. Some Super Tomcat 21. I'm trying to go through here. Sorry, it scrolled away from me. So one moment. For Super Tomcat 21 as proposed, or today's Super Hornet. Oof, I don't know. Super Tomcat 21 probably was going to be really good, but it just would take a lot. So, Super Hornet was kind of already built off of an existing platform, and it's kind of made it a little better. So, if you want to go with, I'll just answer the question. If you go with what was easiest, probably the Super Hornet. I don't know if Super Tomcat would have been as easy. Okay. Hendon Gooner, good evening. Let's see here. No question there, just hi, Hendon. Dulio, do you still remember how you got to know the F-14? A poster, a book? Did you immediately fall in love with its design? That's a good question. So, I mean, honestly, everybody my age and maybe a little bit older or even a little bit younger will remember the first Top Gun movie. That would be the time when I really, really got to know the F-14 in terms of what it looked like, what it did. And that would be the one that I would say makes me remember it. I had a couple of models, like let's see, I had an F-18 model when I was a kid, probably 8 or 9, and a Tomcat model, and then A-10 model. So those 3 were kind of the ones I liked, but F-14 certainly is the best one, just because everybody likes the way it looks from a design aspect, particularly with the wings back. Also, Hendon says, good evening, Joe. Did the long maintenance man hours per flight hour on the F-14A adversely affect availability of flyable aircraft? Did you directly endure this? Yeah, so here's what I will say on that. I think maintenance man hours were certainly up there. The other thing you have to remember is that you need a fair amount of serviceable parts. So when something breaks, you need to have a couple on the shelf to be able to replace it quickly. That certainly took a while in the Tomcat to get that. But what you don't need is, hey, something breaks. We have to pull it off, set it on a test bench. That takes a couple of days to run the test, refix whatever you got, and then you finally get it back. So the supply and logistics probably counts almost as much as the maintenance man hours. And certainly, if you can have both of those running at the same time, you can really have a darn good F-14A and B and D squadron. And we proved that during certainly, the OEF, OIF timeframe, particularly in the early part of that. Proud Heretic says, seeing the size of a Tomcat never gets old when you see one in person. Hey, absolutely not. That's why we call it the big fighter. It's a big fighter, and man, it's as big as a tennis court, and it's pretty amazing when you stand on top of that. See how big the surface area is of that thing, and what an engineering marvel it was to get something that big to be that maneuverable and fast and all that good stuff. So, nice observation there. Mark Jones, if the aircraft is a platform old, a Gen 4 aircraft with a Gen 5 avionics compete and win? That's a really good question. Yeah, I think two things on that, Mark. Number one, a Gen 4 aircraft is great, but it's not stealth. So if stealth matters, early on in the campaign, it probably does. Once you've softened up those surface-to-air missiles, Gen 4 is probably pretty darn good. And if you've got Gen 5 avionics in it, heck yeah. I don't know what that would be, but certainly I would call it Gen 4 Plus if you've got helmet-mounted sight with A9X and certainly all those things. Yeah, that would be pretty darn good. After maybe the first 2 weeks of the war, when we've softened up the surface-to-air missile threat, good to go. Let's see. Proud Heretic says again, my favorite paint schemes the VFA 4 Jolly Rogers. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody loves the Jolly Rogers. And the 213 Black Lions. Okay. Specifically number 213. And yeah, the white and blue paint scheme of the Black Lions was pretty cool. The maintenance guys really took pride in that. I think that's one of the things that's, I don't want to say it's unique to the Tomcat, but guys took a lot of pride. We'd have people try and do new designs. Really, really cool to see everybody that liked it. Okay, Freckle Peter says again, how amazed are you at the Iranians keeping the F-14 flying even in limited numbers, especially given its age and the Western sanctions? Yeah, so they've done a really good job in terms of being able to modify that aircraft and utilize, I guess, some sort of fabrication method to keep that thing flying. I would say that we don't really know what the full capabilities are of it. It may just be a flying tin can that's really fast. I don't know a lot about that. And also, it didn't really ever fly on board ship. So when you've got something that lands softly, it makes a big difference in being able to keep it up and running. Tomcat Junkie says, hey, Tomcat Junkie, good to see you. Not really a question, just wanted to thank you for helping keep the legacy alive. Fighters forever, or Navy fighters forever. Absolutely. Thank you, Tomcat Junkie. Enjoy talking with you on Instagram. Diego says, Smokin, do you have any funny stories from times flying against the USAF, maybe against some Eagles? I can't think of anything off the top of my head for the USAF, but I do know that we fought the Japanese F-15s a couple of times, and they knew we had the Phoenix, right? So they were certainly very aware of that. And we would set up in a certain distance away from each other. And we would turn the corner and come in, catch them on radar. And when we got down to about, halfway through the timeline, and I won't say how long that is, he would take a shot and they would immediately run away. So their only defense against the Phoenix was just to turn and run as fast as possible. So we never saw them. We just scared them away. Let's see. Wingspan being 65 feet. Yeah, it's pretty darn big, and it is still beautiful. So that's cool. Smokin, how good? This is from F-14 Calverton. How good did the tornado look on the Tomcat TCS? Ah, that's funny. I like that. I did get one tornado ride. We took a trip over to England, to the UK, and we flew out of Scotland. And I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of what the correct base was. It's not Coningsby. It's obviously up in the north, next to the golf course. But got to take a tornado out over the ocean and come back. Pretty cool experience. So glad I got to fly in a tornado. Andy Megan, when were you in a dogfight scenario? When you were in a dogfight scenario, which type of scenario did you find that you were forcing the most, the rate fight or a one circle? Well, it depends on who you're fighting. I would say most of your, you MiG-29s, you want to be one circle aggressive pressure with the guy. But if you can get inside of them, that's obviously a big advantage. One thing I would say that Tomcat was pretty good at, though, was being able to add power in a rate fight and being able to plug in the blowers and get away from someone. Could a Tomcat ever be certified to be operated? This is from Beardy Pilot Man. Could a Tomcat ever be certified to be operated for private use, for instance, as a museum, memorial flight, or commercial DACT company? MiG-23 was a great sight. Imagine the F-14 again. You're not the first person to ask that question. Could it ever be certified? That's a question that you'd have to ask Congress probably. I bet there would be some sort of level of congressional certification or authority granted to the Navy to allow it for private use. Is that going to happen? Probably not. The other thing is whoever does that needs to have really deep pockets in terms of money. So I don't know of any museums or groups like that would want to take on that level of risk for the amount of money that you would need to do that. But I will say, a lot of museums take on F-14s and they leave them as static displays and have a hard time even keeping those up from a maintenance standpoint, just from paint. So it would be a phenomenal sight. I'd love to see an F-14 at an air show again, and heck, I'll even be the first to jump in it if I can. Let's see. Yep, the Tomcat was retired way too early. Probably should have taken it out to 2008, 9, 10, somewhere around in there. We pulled that plug a lot earlier by pulling it to 2006. It would have been a better result for the community, I think, rather than just taking a lot of slots away from folks. And I'm talking about people that were in the promotion system. So the picture behind me, Steve, that's done by Rick Herder. I talked about that the first. It's the last demo high-speed pass, absolutely. And it is a commissioned painting. But Rick Herder, Herter, I'm not sure what his Instagram account is. He does have lithographs, I believe, of it for sale. So you can look up that. Okay, don't want to over-scroll here, sorry. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, howdy Smokin, did the APG-71 add any capabilities to the AIM-54 over the AUG-9? Well, that's from Mike L. I think the APG-71 is probably the best way to say it. It moved everything from being analog to digital. Did it add any capabilities to the AIM-54? I don't know about capabilities specifically for the AIM-54, but the APG-71 is just an overall better radar. You got less clutter, and so from that aspect, certainly it was better. But the goal here would be to get the AIM-54 off the rail, for it to find its target and then autonomously seek it out and kill it. And so I think that that's really what you're looking for. And granted, APG-71 much better than the AUG-9, but from an A-54 standpoint, it's still going to do its thing. And one quick story on that, we were doing a missile shoot at night. You shoot what's a drone down, essentially. So we had two AIM-54s coming after the drone. Well, the first AIM-54 gets to the, and we're looking at this on goggles, the first missile gets there, blows the drone up, and then there's little bits and pieces that are kind of floating down. And the second AIM-54 goes and hits those bits and pieces. So the Phoenix was able to kill the drone and then kill the bits too. The second one, which I thought was pretty cool. Let's see here. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Cadet Clark. How did the Tomcat compare against Air Force fighters like the F-15 and F-16? Although you never flew Air Force fighters. Well, I think both of those jets, F-15 and F-16, are phenomenal jets. F-16 is single engine, so that's probably one reason why the Navy really would never look at it. But we made a ton of those. We probably made 4,000 of those, and so they're scattered all over the world. Everybody has one, and so it's what I would call a great, easy to use fighter, and very maneuverable. It's got a lot of capability. F-15 Strike Eagle might be one of the baddest boys on the block today. I can't remember what variant they have right now that we sold to the Saudis, but that one's probably a top-notch Gen 4 plus fighter. And so both of those are newer airframes than the Tomcat, so it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples. But in terms of sexiness, Tomcat's got both of those beat all the way, baby. Did you ever hum Danger Zone? This is from John Minter. Did you ever hum Danger Zone to yourself when you were waiting to take off in an F-14? That's a great question. No, I never hummed Danger Zone, but I do know somebody who rode their motorcycle down the flight line. So in their flight jacket. So there you go, John. Okay, Freckle P says you're protecting. Wow, this is an in-depth question. You're protecting a U.S. carrier. A squadron of Tu-22s is approaching. Would you rather have 6 F-14s airborne with 6 Phoenix each, or the same number of Super Hornets with a dozen Amrams each? Gosh, I'm going to take the 6 F-14s just because I think they'll be able to shoot them down a lot further away than that Diet Phoenix that was being carried by the Super Hornets. Okay, people like the Sluggers. Yeah, Sluggers were cool. Somebody likes the Sundowners. Proud Heritage likes the Sundowners, look badass too. I agree. Yeah, Shark Mouth. And the Shark Mouth showed up a couple of times on VF-101 jets too. And let's see here. VF-101. Okay. John Minard says again, thanks for answering my questions. I've been a Tomcat fan since I was a small boy, and it's an honor to talk to an F-14 crewman. Hey, John, you're not alone. There's a ton of Tomcat fans out there. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if there's anybody that is has any fighter jet or jet that has any bigger fan base than the Tomcat. People. B-29, if you think back, B-29, P-51 Mustang, those are iconic aircraft, certainly for modern day folks like the F-22. But in terms of chutzpah, Tomcat really resonates. Okay. Sorry for it. Scrolled here a little bit off. Lucas, thank you, Hen Gunner. Thank you, Lucas, REF Lucas. Yes, fantastic. Right next to the golf course, you take off and you see the Firth of Forth, if I'm not mistaken. Every day is a Tomcat day for me, says Proud Heretic again, and I'm flying it in the Ace Combat 7. Okay, fantastic. Keep flying it. Work up to DCS if you can. Let's see here. Okay, Tomcat Junkie says, I've heard stories that the Raptor dudes were surprised by the capabilities brought by the IRST on Mighty D. Any chance you want to elaborate on that? Well, so IRST infrared tracking system, passive, which is nice because really all you got to do is turn that thing on and you look for heat and you could find something with it. I think all aircraft, modern day fighters should have some level of IRST on them. I know Super Hornet's getting a modification, I think, for it, but it allows you to be silent and deadly, kind of like those submarines. I don't know from a Raptor standpoint. I can't answer that question if they were surprised or not. But IRST is a pretty good piece of gear to have on your kit. All right. This is RTD89, how is the AIM-54 Charlie at maneuvering targets at max range? Was Phoenix still effective at the twilight of its career? Kind of double question there. So we talked about the story of, shooting that drone, and then the second Phoenix able to adjust in flight and hit the bits. I think that tells you that the maneuvering ability of that missile was phenomenal. When you get to a super long range, and I'm talking, 100 nautical miles plus, you probably could maneuver out of an envelope that the Phoenix could find you. But if you're inside of that, and I'm not going to say numbers on there, but if you're inside of that at some point, it was probably pretty hard to get away from. Was the Phoenix still effective at the twilight of its career? Yeah. Some of them had sat on the shelf too long, and so the motors wouldn't fire. I think that was unfortunate because the ones that we did have that were shot, and I'll tell you, I did a Phoenix missile shoot on the Kitty Hawk, and we had I think 10 out of 11 bula bulas. Bula bula meaning the term you say when you hit the target. So that's a pretty good success rate. Neil Pearson, do you think Iranian Tomcats will be seeing combat time any soon? Ooh, I don't know. That is a question that I don't know. I will say that they better be prepared because Israel is pretty darn good. Let's see. Was the framing, especially the front of the canopy, a hindrance in terms of forward visibility? Would you like to see a frameless canopy upgrade? That would probably be pretty cool. A frameless canopy, kind of like what you see on some of the modern fighters, would certainly benefit. I think the other thing that you'd have to have go with that, though, is a helmet-mounted, joint helmet-mounted queuing system. That would really be nice to add to the Tomcat. You see that in the Super Hornet. Those guys have the ability to, look left or look right, and then, basically take a designation on a target and shoot it with their helmet. That's pretty sharp. Did I ever fly any tarps missions? Absolutely. Tarps was a fantastic reconnaissance pod system that took basically wet film camera shots. It was a really good system. We typically had 2 Tomcat squadrons per air wing, one being the tarps squadrons and one not being the tarp squadrons. And then when we went down to kind of single Tomcat squadrons, those guys left would normally take over that tarps mission. Robin Ollie, my son Ollie is a massive Tomcat fan. Fantastic, Ollie. If you could give him a hi, he's missing this tonight as he's got air cadets. Well, Ollie, fantastic to know that you're a massive Tomcat fan. Keep working on the air cadets, and there's a lot of really cool jets out there that you'll be able to fly, and keep it up. So Mike says, just to clarify, a lot of people said you only needed a slight offset to notch the M54. So just curious if the APG-71 alleviates some of that. I don't know the answer to that question, Mike. Maybe. But, remember the notch that you're doing, it depends on where you are. And if you're far out and you're just trucking down, APJ-71 or AUG-9 has found you and you don't know what's coming at you, you ain't going to notch. You're just going to get blown up. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay. Yep, got a shout out to the F-18F Jolly Rogers and F-15 Strike Eagle, some of my favorites. Cool. Ace Combat's a superb game. Yep, you gamers would know that. I don't know it. But keep those up. That keeps the legacy alive. I mean, it's really, DCS has done a great job of keeping the legacy alive, and I think we got a lot of interest. Let's see here. VX9 Vampire's Black Cat looks gorgeous. Proud Heretic talks about that. I'll tell you what, when you put that black cat up on Instagram, and there's going to be a shot of that I've got on Friday coming out, people love that VX9 Vampire, all black. I will tell you, that must have been a pain in the rear end to keep painted to look right. But for the folks that are fans, the Black Cat VX9 really is probably the biggest iconic one from a paint scheme. Scott 11078 says, when were you on the Kitty Hawk? Looks like you were a hull technician that did a brace job on the cat, so the gun will work. Oh, very cool, Scott. Well, thank you for your service. I was in the Kitty Hawk 99 to 02, and I left right before we invaded. And so, hull technician doing some great work on our guns. Listen, we need those guns. Folks need to be able to do gun work close in. And so, thanks for helping out with that. John Minner says, is it a coincidence that the Navy pilots have reported seeing, I guess, unidentified objects, UAPs, since the Tomcat retired? I think those aliens had too much respect for the mighty Tomcat. Yes, even aliens would run away bravely from the Tomcat, John. I think you're right. Ever fire a live Phoenix, Sparrow, or Sidewinder rounds from the Pecker? But yes, fired Phoenix. You know, here's an interesting story about that Phoenix. You hit the button, and then it feels like an eternity before that sucker comes off the jet. And you're like, did you hit the button? Did you hit? And then it comes off, and it drops, and then it takes off and does what's called an M-band, main beam avoidance maneuver. So it goes straight up to the moon, which is really cool sight to see. And so that was a fun time to shoot that. Winder's good. You know, the problem with the winder is you shoot it in close. Got to get a good tone. Hey, it sounds like we got to get our last questions coming in. So got a few more here we'll try to work on. Let's see. Proud Heritage talking about shooting. No, not shooting. Die-cast models. Yeah, the models are popular these days. And I like the 1/48 scale. That probably gives you enough detail. Let's see. Robin Ollie says, do you have any way we can contact you to maybe get a print signed? Absolutely. You can contact me. Probably the easiest way, and for those folks out there, I sign stuff all the time. Not all the time, but occasionally. And my Instagram handle is at F-14 Tomcat Demo, DEMO. That's probably the easiest way, and I will try and see if we can set up a way to sign that. Let's see. Did we ever fly? Cadet Clark says, did we ever fly in any legacy heritage formation flights? Yes, we did. Those guys have to go through a training program to prove that they can fly formation. So we would do a training program kind of at the first of the demo. And then it really just depended at the air show, did somebody show up that you could do a heritage formation flight? Typically, you would do that after you did your demo. So they would stay airborne. You would join up on them. They're probably the lead because they're going to be the slowest. And you would do the flyby. How did I feel during my first, Andy Megan says, how did I feel during my first deck launch and landing? Okay, that's a really good question. So the first time coming in, we actually boltered. I don't know if anybody knows what a bolter is, but it's when you miss the wire. We had a hook skip. And so it felt like, just a touch and go. But then when you came back around and trapped, it was a pretty strange feeling because you do kind of a controlled crash for sure. You get pulled forward and you see you stop really quick. And then first catapult in the Tomcat, certainly a really cool feeling. You get pushed back in your seat. A lot of fast movement coming down the catapult, a little bit of a blur from the peripheral vision. And then once you hit the end of the stroke, it's real smooth. So it's kind of clickety-clack down the catapult like you would be in a roller coaster, getting pushed back pretty hard. And then it turns into really smooth from there on. Scott, again, the HT says for a gun exercise in 2002. Yeah, it's been too long. That's been a long time ago. We used to do shoot the banner toe. I don't think they shoot banner tows anymore. Just too dangerous. So let's see. Would you have liked to see a Tomcat Blue Angel squadron? This is always a big topic of discussion on the Instagram stuff. You know, a Tomcat Blue Angel squadron would be awesome. I think where you'd really want to use them is the opposing solos. I don't know if you'd want to have a full diamond formation with all Tomcats, but sure, 2 opposing solos would be pretty awesome. Do I know what the deal was between the Rippers and the Dogs? No, I don't know what the deal was between the Red Rippers and the Puking Dogs, but I do know they were both in Oceania at the same time. And yes, Tomcats and a Blue Angels paint scheme look pretty cool. I think I posted somebody did a DCS version of that and looked pretty cool. I posted that. BKR. Absolutely BKR, Scott. Black Knights rule. All right. It looks like we're coming down to the last bit here. Neil says he was lucky to see the last Tomcat demo at Oceania in 2005. I was also the last demo at Nellis in 2004, and we flew after the Raptor demo and kicked their ass. You know, Neil, I'm going to say this is a good time to probably finish it up, and I will tell you that show in Nellis might have been one of the coolest shows that we ever did. I don't know about folks that know this, but the Raptor had just come out, and of course, Nellis is an Air Force base, and they got a Tomcat to come there, which was a big deal. And one of the last times, the last time a Tomcat was ever going to fly really west of the Mississippi, from what I remember. And so we got out there and we went full bore. I mean, we were hauling the chili, and really Opie and Rocco both did great demos on that weekend. The F-22 was brand new, and they had it really limited on what it could do. It was probably, 1,000 feet AGL and really nice, easy turns. They didn't want to break the thing. But the perception from the crowd was, holy smokes, we just saw the Tomcat whip the F-22's butt. And it's always been a great thrill of mine to know that. We had a really good show. Of course, it was handicapped. F-22 is a darn good airplane. We bought only 188 of them. Should have bought more of them. But it was a fun time, and it was Vegas, baby.
I mean, what a brilliant Q&A there. I mean, Smokin, some great questions are coming in there. How did you feel about that? I mean, like, the questions were so technical as well. So, I appreciate you guys coming in the chat there.
I appreciate the technical questions. It's making my brain work. I hope I answered everything to the best of my ability. So we can do it again for those that want to do more at some point later down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely get Smokin back on for a chat. But for you guys who joined us in the chat, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to see some familiar faces and some new ones. But Smokin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mike. I had a fantastic time, and I'm glad we got fans all over the world. Tomcats, anytime, baby.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.